Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. We've got the
Yeah,
team from AWS Amplify with us today. Do we just want to do a quick round robin, kind of do an introduction? We'll start at my top right. Scott, you want to go first?
yeah, sure. So I'm Scott. I work as a front-end engineer for the Amplify UI team. Some of the things I enjoy doing would be sailing with my wife Mariah and playing with my two boys. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. Actually, 5-year-old now. He would be mad at me if I said 4.
Nice. Heather, do you want to go?
Sure. I'm also front engineer at Amazon. My name is Heather. I work on Scott's team at Amplify UI. I focus on UI and accessibility. When I'm not doing that, I'm probably walking my dog around Brooklyn, playing video games. That's me.
Nice. What kind of dog? I have to ask.
She's a little pit bull mix.
Nice. Very cool. Eric.
Hello. Hi. I'm also on the same team as these two guys. So work in the front end. I do a lot of stuff on the Authenticator and authentication on our team. And I'm just a big fan of learning and teaching. I also have a YouTube channel, which you can check out a program with Eric. And yeah, it's fun to be on here and talk about Amplify.
I have to know, is there a name behind your nameplate with the silver YouTube up there?
Yeah, that's the program with Eric YouTube channel. So
it's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I always forget the colors. Is that 100,000?
Yeah, that's 100,000.
Nice. Congratulations. It's a lot of work to get to.
Yeah, no kidding.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think what we're going to talk about today is all of the Amplify UI things that are happening right now. There was a big release that came up. Scott, you're going to talk a little bit about that today?
Yeah, so we recently released the Amplify UI component library, which is a bunch of different React primitives, as well as we also have connected components, but the big release was making generally available all of the primitive components.
Nice. Was that considered a 1.0 release, or is that more than that?
I think, well, we had the package also contains the Authenticator, so I think we're currently at 3.0. Okay. There was a previous version of the Authenticator, which our primitives are exported out of, but it was a major release.
Nice. Very cool. Do you want to dive in and kind of show us more of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So just to kind of give you a little bit of background, and just in case people don't know what Amplify is, I just want to briefly talk about what Amplify is, and then we'll dig into kind of the UI side of things.
That's probably a great place to start.
Yeah. Yeah, so Amplify is a set of front-end tools or a set of tools that allows front-end web and mobile developers to quickly spin up and build full stack applications on AWS. So some of these tools people may be familiar with. There's Amplify Studio, which allows you to visually build a full stack app. Amplify CLI allows you to spin up backend environments from your terminal. There's an Amplify hosting service that you can host static websites. And then there's a number of other libraries that allow you to connect to different AWS services. So where we fit in that, what is Amplify UI? So again, it's a UI component library that brings that simplicity of AWS Amplify to UI development. So some of the reasons you might want to use Amplify UI, we offer a bunch of different connected components. So the Authenticator, which we'll be looking at a little bit later with Eric, is an example of that. But the point of our cloud connected components is to simplify really complex workflows like authentication, connecting to data stores, things of that nature. Another reason that you probably want to check out the Amplify UI components is because we built them to be very customizable and themeable. We kind of see this library is sitting in the middle of like the spectrum of UI libraries that are available. So on one hand, you have kind of headless UI frameworks like Radix and headless UI, which really provide like functionality, but they don't provide any styling. Like you're supposed to bring your own styling. On the other side of the spectrum is something like MUI, which is sort of batteries included. The styling's already there. Like there's some customization, but it's like sometimes difficult to like really get it customized maybe the way you want. So we're kind of in the middle because we allow you to, like, the CSS is imported separately and it's just CSS. We're not using like emotion or something. So you can just leave the CSS out if you wanted to, and you could completely restyle the authenticator or any of our components yourself while keeping all of that functionality that's available with the components. Or you can use our default theme. So we have a default theme, so they're already styled out of the box. And then you can go and use one of our theming APIs or just CSS to change the theme to what you want it to look like. So that's kind of why we see it sitting in the middle and kind of covering quite a broad range of use cases.
I think in the past there was always like Amplify UI components that covered like Angular and Vue and React Native and all of those. Is this like a subset of that, or is this kind of the next version that you guys are going with?
Yeah, so in the past, I think we had an authenticator and we had a number of different like connected components. There are a few legacy components that we still have that like connect to S3 and images that we're working on actually rebuilding because there are some limitations with them. The authenticator, I believe, was available for Vue and Angular in the past. Isn't that correct, Eric?
Yep. Yes, it was. Yeah. We support those in that.
Yeah, so this is the authenticator was a rebuild because of some of the styling problems that customers had with the previous version, where it was hard to customize the styling. We were using Stencil, and there was the Shadow DOM was like making it hard to like customize the styling of the buttons and things, and so we rebuilt it to be very customizable and very themeable. So that was kind of the major change with the authenticator. But then while we were building the authenticator, we thought, well, we should build these primitive components or like these smaller pieces. And so we built out a bunch of those. But like, as you're saying, like one of the goals actually when we were building these components is just to make them be multi-framework, multi-platform. So the authenticator, the new version of the authenticator is available in React, Vue, and Angular. We also have a Flutter authenticator, and we have plans to have more authenticator connected components in other platforms. The UI primitives, which are kind of the smaller pieces, are available in React currently, but we're also planning on adding more frameworks and platforms in the future.
Nice. Very cool. Did you want to show off a little bit of kind of cool?
Yeah.
Share your screen.
Yeah. So
we'll see if this way or this way is better. I never know.
Yeah, no, I think it's good to show off the UI docs site. We worked really hard on it to make it show off. It's obviously built entirely with Amplify UI components, and so we're pretty proud of it. But these are a couple of the points that I talked about, like the styling is very flexible. We're not like locking you into a particular CSS and JS library. If you want to bring your own CSS and JS library, that's fine, but we don't like make you use a particular one. We have the cloud connected components, and then we also have like pretty good integration with Amplify Studio. But I did want to talk a little bit more about like what the primitive components are. So like that would be something like a card, an image. I'll actually come down here where there's like ones you can click on. So here you got like a switch. We've got pagination, buttons, search, all 40 different components like that. But kind of as I was talking about a little bit, like the approach that we took to this for styling for the web frameworks was to use plain CSS and also make them themeable via CSS variables.
Nice.
So the entire default theme comes with CSS variables that you can just target directly in your CSS. But some people don't want to do it that way. And sometimes it's a little easier to target, the having like a more styling API that's in your React. So for that, we offer the style props. So you can see here, we've got like a style prop for direction, font size large, large being one of our size design tokens that you can also customize. But then you get kind of that IntelliSense in your editor. So that's a little bit about the primitives and kind of some of the styling APIs that are available. I'll be demoing that a little bit more in a minute. But let's talk a little bit more about the connected components before we kind of dig into some code. So this is the Authenticator. The Authenticator, as we kind of talked about, is this cloud connected component. And the real big benefit to it is you can just drop it into your application and get all these complicated authentication workflows that, as developers, we may have implemented these many times in the past, and they're like a pain in the neck, and there's always like some edge case that you miss, or you really just have to spend a ton of time like going through all of them. So you can drop this in. You now have with minimal configuration, you can have a sign-in workflow, create account workflow, forgot your password, all the things that you would expect. And then you can also dig into more advanced features like multi-factor auth or sign in with Facebook or sign in with Google. All the like federated sign-in stuff is also supported. So this gives you a way to get something going quickly, but then you have that full customization when you're ready to like make it more complicated from a functionality perspective. But also the other thing that I'm sure all of us developers have run into is like, this is great, but this doesn't match my brand, right? Like that's a common problem as a developer. I've run into that many times in the past. This is fully themable. Like I said before, like don't include the CSS, and then you could completely restyle it if you want to go that extreme. Or you can use the default theme and like change the brand colors, change the sizes, the spacing. All of those things are customizable to get the look and feel that you want for the Authenticator.
As far as the authentication goes, typically you're on like the Amplify CLI and creating that kind of package, for lack of a better term, and CloudFormation does its thing and sets up authentication. Is that the typical flow that a person running Amplify will usually do that and then kind of take these UI components and start adding them on, especially Authenticator?
Yeah, especially for the Authenticator, the primitive components can be used all by themselves. You wouldn't even have to like touch the CLI. They're agnostic basically. But yeah, for the Authenticator, you would run the CLI command. You could also do it from Amplify Studio if you don't want to use the CLI. You could configure it there. But yeah, you would use the Amplify to actually set up the like auth backend. It'd be using Amazon Cognito.
And we have heard of some people using CDK, so you could even use the CDK to scaffold the backend and then use that with the Amplify.
Yeah, I was doing a lot with Pulumi for a little while, kind of tapping into it and then adding CDK on top of it. So it was really nice flow to like get into, and it'd be cool to. I know I was using like the legacy, if you call it that, UI component for authentication. It worked really well, so I'm excited to check this new one out.
Awesome.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah, sorry I interrupted you. You're going into like
No.
the theming side, right?
Yeah. So I thought, so we kind of talked about the connected component, particularly the authenticator. I thought I'd just walk through, like briefly, just kind of show some of the components that are available. So you have like some ones you would expect, like a heading, text, divider. Like the reason that you would have a text primitive is because we add all those styling APIs that you can use right on the component. Same with heading, just kind of makes it a little bit simpler. We have feedback components like a loader, alert, navigation, so links and tabs, a full set of input components for having building forms and such. And then there's layout components. So we have one that uses a flex component that you can use to lay out using Flexbox, and grid, and collections, which is actually kind of like a list. It just generates, and we'll see that one a little bit later with Heather's demo. And then there's, data display and kind of utility components. So that's enough just talking about what you can see on the doc site. How about we dig into some actual code so that everyone doesn't fall asleep on me? Because everyone likes to see code. You should be able to. Okay, yeah. So let's. I'll just copy over my starting app here real quick. So I've kind of gone ahead and set up like a basic Create React app. It's using TypeScript because I want to show off a few features that you get if you have the types on the theme. But, everyone's familiar with setting up Create React app. And if you're not, then we have a Create React app guide on the website that kind of walks you through that. So we have this Create React app. And I think one of the common scenarios that developers have, and we kind of mentioned this before, is I have some brand colors that I want to use. And so we're going to build a little newsletter component for the Perfect Dev podcast here. And so we need to pull some of those brand colors in. I'm not going to use the exact ones, but I've seen pink used quite a bit. So we're going to use that for some of the buttons and some of the text.
It's funny because I can always say 5E1286 is our purple, but I can never remember our pink. So,
okay, well, I was going to quiz you on that, but since you don't have that one memorized, we'll have to use the design tokens for pink. Great. So the first thing you would do, I already have it installed, but let's just run it anyway so you can kind of see. The first thing that you would do would be add AWS Amplify UI React and the AWS Amplify peer dependency. That's for the JavaScript libraries that we use under the covers. So let's just run that. That's going to add those two dependencies there. So if we were to pop open the package JSON, you'll see we now have UI React version 3.4. And then we've also got AWS Amplify down here. Great. So now I can uncomment these two lines because I had them commented out because they throw errors. A couple of things we're doing here. The main one here is we're importing the styles. This is giving us all the styling for the default theme. And that will give us all the CSS variables as well. And we'll look at how to use those a little bit later. So you can see nothing's really changed yet. We're not using any components yet, but we do have the styling available to us. So the first thing I'm going to do is just add a view. A view is really just a div, but it adds some of those theming APIs on top of it. So if I save that, not really much is going to change, but we've now got a div around that. The next thing I'm going to do, since we're building a newsletter component, is I'm going to just add a heading so that people know, hey, this is for signing up for the newsletter. I'll save that. And I guess if I don't run my dev server, let's see, run start. Okay, there we go. All right, so now we've got a newsletter heading here. The default, I believe, is a level 6, so it's an H6 right now. I happen to know that this is going to be a 4 on the app that I'm using. If I were, I would probably refactor this out so that I could pass the level in, but for now, we're just going to use level 4. So you can see it got a little bit bigger. So let's look at some of those styling props that I was talking about before. So I want to match the brand colors here. So I'm going to use the color style prop, and then I'm going to just start typing pink. And you'll see you're already getting autocomplete. That's because our style props are aware of all of our design tokens that are in the default theme. So we have a set of colors. I think Heather's going to talk about them a little bit more. But we've got a number of different pinks. I'm just going to pick pink 80 here. So we save that. Now we've got some color. So we're starting to make some progress here. The next thing I'm going to do is add like a text element, a text component. And then I'm just going to copy and subscribe for all the latest updates. And this is basically just a p tag, as I mentioned before, but it does have all those styling props available to it. We have IntelliSense here. It's going to give us a lot of the HTML things first. So I'm just going to change the font style here. And I'm going to make that italic. All right. So we're making a little progress here, but obviously a form's not all that interesting if you don't have, well, actually, I'll back up just a minute. So it's bothering me that it's like way over to the left. So I'm just going to wrap the whole thing in a view. Put that down here. Thank you, prettier. And now we have centered newsletter component. That's just because it was bothering me. But it's also so we can talk about a few things on the view. So we've got a margin top of large. Large is, again, one of our design tokens that you can use. It's also customizable at the theme level. So if you wanted large to be enormous, it could be, or you can adjust all those things. We've got a margin inline. Oh, sorry, were you going to say something?
I was just going to ask if large is dependent on like device size or like window width. So it goes from like whatever 8 rem m to like 2 once you're on mobile or something like that.
It's not, but that does kind of give me a chance to talk about the responsive style props, because you could also do that. So what we could do is say we want it to be large when it's at the base, like
Gotcha.
like at the base breakpoint, which is kind of the smaller breakpoint, and then say maybe when you hit medium, you want it to be extra large. I think it's just XL. Is that right, Heather?
Yeah, cool. That's
right. So it should get a little bit bigger. You can see it bumps down once it hits that medium breakpoint. And I think you could change the spacing using our in the theme provider and in the theme object using overrides. You could use a media query in there and then actually change those design tokens. So actually that is possible. They're not that way by default. Okay, so let's go ahead and add some a text field and a button in here. So I'm going to start by adding a flex here. And then I'm going to change the direction to column so that it's stacked. And then I'm going to add in the text field. So the way that we built the form components is we tried to take an approach where they're accessible by default. So rather than having to attach a label to an input and like do it, always remember that you have to put 4 on the label and you put the ID on the input, and sometimes you get them confused and it doesn't quite work right. We thought, hey, why don't we just make that a little bit easier? Why is it saying I think I didn't import this? Oh yeah. Okay. Actually, that's another thing. So I actually put the ID of email on here, but it's a little bit mad at me, and we'll just look at why. It's saying that the property label is missing. So label is a required field. And the reason for that is because if you don't have label text, then we can't really put anything in the label. So let's add a label here of email. And let's go ahead and save that. So now you can see we've got a text field showing on the page. If I click on the email, you can see it's actually connected to the input field. So it's already been wired up. If you don't put an ID on here, we still will wire it up. We'll just generate the ID for you. That way, if for some reason you don't have it on there, then it's still going to be accessible. So next, let's put a button on here because we need people to actually be able to sign up. So I'm going to say sign up on there, and then I'm going to make this have a variation of primary since this is the primary action. So I'll go ahead and save that. So there's still one thing missing here, which is the color's still wrong. So the button's a little bit different in terms of styling it because it's it's got a hover effect. It's got an active, there's active, hover, focus. So we're actually going to style that via the theme provider. So I'm going to import the theme provider, and that'll give me a chance to show you about it. A few things about it. So we'll put it up here. We'll wrap the whole app in it. So I'll pull that up and save that. You'll notice nothing's changed, and that's because we didn't override the theme. So if you don't override the theme, it's not going to do anything. So let's go ahead and pull a theme in. Sorry. So I'm going to create a theme object here. And I'm actually going to give it a type of theme. So I'll pull in the theme TypeScript type. And that'll give us some nice IntelliSense on this. So the first thing that happens is I believe it's going to start, it's going to start being mad at us because we missed the name. So let's add perfect dev, perfect, I'll just call it perfect theme. And then we can start adding some design tokens here. So we'll add the tokens. We want to customize the components. We want to change the button. We want to change the primary button. And then we're going to change the background color to have a value of, and here I'm going to use one of our design tokens. So this will refer to those base design token color schemes. So I'm going to say colors.pink.60. And then while we're here, I'm also going to change the hover. Oh, and I always forget this comma. Let's put the comma there. And I'll change the background color for the hover. Colors.pink.60. Actually, I think this one's 80. That way it's a little darker. And I need a quote. No, I missed something. Oh, I don't.
I think there's one on the inside past the 80 there.
Thank you.
No worries.
Yeah. I do like the new VS Code, like colored curly braces, though. That's been so helpful. Okay. So nothing changed because I didn't pass it to the provider. Let's pass it to the provider. And then let's go over here. And now we have a hover effect and a colored, the right branded color button. So yeah, actually I did have one more thing that I wanted to show you, which is the email. You'll notice actually already has the right color, and that's because I already added some CSS that I didn't tell you about. This is I just wanted to show this off because it just shows how flexible our theming options are. Like sometimes you don't have to just use the theming props. You don't have to just use the theme provider. If you want to just write CSS, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. So this is targeting the Amplify text field class, which is going to surround this whole thing, including both the label and the input. And then we're targeting a specific CSS variable, the Amplify component's field label color, and then we're actually assigning it to another one of our design tokens or CSS variables called Amplify colors pink. So that kind of gives you a idea of the full spectrum of the theming options that are available.
Nice. We had a question come in. I think it was for the previous screen there. If colors.pink would work too. I'm not sure if it's the class then instead of the object, like broken out like that.
So Heather's probably better at answering this question.
Right, colors.pink won't work because we need to drill down to our scale. So in our design tokens that we're generating, they kind of work on this level where you have like a namespace, so that would be colors, and then we further section those out by the hue, which would be pink in this case. And then we use a range of colors, so I think there's 10 for each, going from like 10 to 100, and then there's some like steps in between. So 10 refers to like the lightest color, and then 100 would be like the darkest color. And we have a section on our UI docs site, which I can also show later, but that kind of shows like every default theme color we have to start with.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks.
Awesome. I think I can, that's all that I have for the demo. If you have any questions, or Heather can take it on with the main demo.
My only question that I have right now is like thinking about the Amplify side of this in my head. Do these components like make it easier when you're taking in inputs to like update Dynamo through whatever on the Amplify side, or is it just kind of the normal way of taking in an input at that point?
Yeah, so at the moment that would just be the norm. It would be the normal way. You just have to connect directly. But that being said, these are the same components that the Figma and Studio use to generate code. So I don't know if you've looked at that at all, but there's a capability in Amplify Studio where you can actually design these components. I think we have a little bit of, let me pull up the UI doc site again. But there's the Figma integration that we have basically allows you to
In this video, we're
sorry, I'll just mute that real quick. You can be in Figma and then generate like a component. So yeah, that's showing. Thought I could find one more. Oh yeah, here it is. So like you're inside of Figma, you generate like a design in Figma using our UI components.
Sure,
like you can add a button, you can add a card, you can add an image, and then you pull that down into Amplify Studio, and you can actually attach that to data, and then export that down into your application as a component, and it'll generate like readable, real React code like you would write it using hooks to data store, and then you could use that with the theme provider. And if you had parts of your app that are completely custom, you could just keep using the UI primitives for the rest of those parts, or go through Figma.
Yeah, that's really cool. Nice. So Heather, you're gonna kind of take this next step and dive in a little further at this point?
Yeah, I can show us how we can look at some more of the components and some more like theming options. So if I can share my screen.
Yep.
And then kind of show what we're gonna start building. So we have this little mock-up of like a properties listing app, kind of maybe like Airbnb type of clone kind of thing. So we have some cards to represent each property. And then we can see we have a header with our logo. We have a sign-in button. So maybe we'll want to do something with routing and authentication, which Eric will show us a little bit later. And we also have some a color scheme on the side that our designer made, which happens to be me in this case. And you can see we have a little bit more like muted colors compared to the default UI. Our default UI uses a little bit like brighter, more saturated colors. So we know we're going to we're going to want to build out some components to make these little card components. So if I hop over to where I'm going to start with, I just also scaffolded out a Create React app, and there's a guide on our doc site, like Scott mentioned, that shows everything to do there, but pretty simple to get up and running. And for me to start with, I set up some basic routes for us to work with. So our home page will be our properties listing, and then I stubbed out like a login and admin page too.
Very cool.
And then just to see what else I added. So I added React router so we can do a little bit of routing for the authentication. Also added an icons package. React icons has kind of like a conglomerate of a bunch of different icon libraries that I like to use. And then since we're mostly going to focus on, oh, hello connections. We're going to mostly focus on building out UI components. So I just made some placeholder data, like a JavaScript object. If we were going to go the full like Amplify route, this is where you might go over to Amplify Studio and design out your data there. Because Amplify Studio is kind of like our visual backend designer, where you can set up your schemas and all of your GraphQL queries and things right from an admin type of UI. But for us, we're just going to use some hard-coded data to start with.
Cool.
So let's see. I think I'm going to start with building out just one of these cards, so like one property. So I'll hop over to code. And I also, let me show, I have the app running with just like some starter HTML elements, just to save a little bit of time. So you can see I'm just like iterating through each property list. There's going to be some things we want to fix, like these images are a little bit stretched out. So we'll go over that also. Also set up my header a little bit. So right now it's just unstyled, not using any of our components. So let's start with the property card. So I'll go down to my JSX here. And I know I probably want to have a link wrapping each card. Let me make some space. So I'm going to use our Amplify link component. And for now, we'll just have it keep linking back to the root. But probably you'd want to link it to like a detail page or something like that. And then let's fix our image component. So we're going to use the Amplify image component. All of these are just regular HTML or attributes that you'd have on a normal image element. But I want to fix this like stretched behavior that's going on. So that's where I'll use a style prop like Scott was mentioning. And we're going to set this to object fit. And we'll do, let's see, I think we want cover. I always mix it up with contain. And we should see, make sure I'm still running. Okay. So you kind of see it like crop the images a little bit. Now they're not as stretched out. You could also do, if you wanted to do contain, then it would keep the aspect ratio, but we want it to fill all the space. We'll keep that. And then if we go back to our mockups, we know that we have our heading. We kind of want it to sit next to this star rating component. So that's where I'll use that flex box component that Scott showed. So we'll do flex. I'm going to drop these into there. Reposition this so we can see. So the alignment's really weird right now. We'll fix that too by using some just layout rules that we can also pass as style props. Do align item center, and that fixes that layout. And then let's start restyling the heading. So I'll use heading component, and I want mine to be in H2. So I'll do heading level 2. And the font size is a little big right now. We're actually going to fix that in our theme object instead, just so we can show that off. So we'll circle back to that. And then we'll replace this rating value where it says 4 right here. We want that to be the star rating component. So we'll add that in, and we'll make the value for that rating.
On the image component, does that do anything else like lazy load the images or anything?
It does not. I don't think we have any of that.
More just styling.
Yeah, it's more just styling, kind of like taking the basic image element and adding some properties to it for like utility. Let's see. So our rating component's really big right now. We want that to be small, so we'll just use a small variation. And since this is actually a flex component, like under the hood, so if I look at rating, you can see it's picking up that Amplify Flex class. So we can apply Flex layout rules to this component, and it will also pick them up. So I can set a gap of, let's do something kind of small. Cool. And then I also want to align it to the right. So it's always on the right, no matter how short the title is. So let's do margin inline start. I'll make that auto. So one thing cool about using like margin inline instead of margin left or margin right is if you're going to localize this and you wanted it to work for right to left languages, the browser would automatically know how to switch those to be right versus left.
Nice.
So that's kind of a cool thing I've learned recently. Let's see. And then we have some kind of like longer titles that are spilling over to 2 lines. Like this one's really long. So let's make this actually truncated. It's just a prop we have for headings. And we want that true. Cool. So 1 line, that's looking better. We'll come back and fix the color for our star rating object also. But for now, let's move on to the beds. So in our mockup, oops, let's see what we have. We've got a little icon and then a little bit lighter gray text. So that's where like Scott was showing off how to use the color style props. We can do that for there too. So I'm just going to put this in another flex object just so I can align the icon with the text a little bit easier. And I'm going to pull in icon component. And this is pretty neat because, oops, let me spell that right. You can use it with like any SVG icon library. So we're using, I have box icons from that React icons package. So I'm going to use that and just do as icon. Now we have a little tiny bed icon showing up, which is what we want. And then again, I'm going to use some flex layout rules to center that vertically. Make it so we can see this a little better. And we also want to change the color to something a little bit lighter. So we'll do color. And then I'm going to do neutral, which is like our gray color scheme. And we'll do neutral 80. Should be pretty good. And then again, we can adjust those like gap properties so it's a little bit closer. The text is a little closer to the icon. Great. And then the last thing for this is we just want to make this text color a little bit different. So we can replace this with our text component. Replace those. And we want the rating itself to be bold. So again, these are all tokens that we've defined in our default theme. So you could also do like thin or light or other font weights.
Nice. Are you able to set like font families on that too?
Yes, you could theoretically go in and add a font family. So we have, let me just show really quick on the docs site. If you go to default theme, you can go to typography, and this shows some of the tokens. We still need to add a couple of the default tokens, but there's font weights, font sizes, there's line heights, and then font families. So we have a default one loaded, but you could add both a variable font and a static font for that.
Very cool.
Cool. So let's see where we are. These are on 2 lines. You want them to be on 1. So we're going to make those a span. Because by default, it's a paragraph tag. Change that. And then I think I want that lighter color again. We'll copy this, add it there. So this is all using style props so far. And like Scott mentioned, there's a bunch of different ways that you can style Amplify UI components. So I'm gonna hop over and show like how we would do this, do some of the styling using the theme object. So if I go back here and I just have a file stubbed out to create my theme. And again, I'm just importing the theme interface so we get some nice TypeScript support, some nice autocomplete. And here I'm going to just export a theme object. And we'll do, yelling at me because we're missing a name. So we'll do name equals, let's do cabin theme. And first I want to fix this heading size, which is kind of weird. So we know we're going to update tokens. We'll drill into that and then go into components, then heading. And then I want to change heading level 2. Then we can do font size and then pass that a value. So here you could do something like 20 pixels. You could do like whatever you might use for like a CSS property rule. But we want to reference a design token because we have like pretty extensive design tokens set up to start with. So we'll do font sizes. Let's do large. We're not going to see it yet because I haven't added it yet. So let's go over to our entry point. And here's where I can import that theme. Right there. And I'm already importing the theme provider, so I'm just going to wrap that around here. Get you back in there. And then we can set our theme. Looks like I'm missing something. Type string is not assignable.
Curly braces.
Oh, there we go. Cool. So now we can see our font size is updated. And our, well, that's all we've changed so far is the font size. So let's go back over to theme because we also wanted a different color for the star rating component. If we look at our mockup, got some kind of green colored stars there. So let's add that here too. We can go into rating and, oh, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to grab all of these colors that match our color scheme. So we were modifying the tokens at a component level. We can also modify it at that like base level, which is what you'd see. Like these are examples of like our very like base tokens. So let's add colors. And we'll add all of our color schemes in there. And nothing's going to change too much because we're using a lot of like black and white and neutral colors right now. But if we go down to rating, we can do, let's see, I want filled. And then I think we want color, yeah. And then we'll pass it a value. So we could do something like red. And then all our stars will show up red, but we're going to use an actual color design token. And let's do like 60. Looks pretty good. Yeah, that works for me. Cool.
Nice.
Let's see. So we changed our property card. I want to like deal with like the responsive layout now. So right now it's all just stacked into one row or one column. So if we go into our routes where I have my properties, so I already have a collection component set up. So Scott kind of mentioned this. Collection lets you pass it a list of items and kind of iterate through those with a component of your choosing. So for mine, I'm using that property card that we just made. And that's how it's putting it into our UI. And I want to adjust the column. So you could also do type equals list, which makes it more of like a flexbox list, but I'm going to do type equals grid. And then I can use some more like grid layout rules. So we have template columns already set up. I want to make this a little more responsive. So I'll pass it a responsive object, and we can do, let's see, string actually, max 0, and we'll do up to 500 pixels. So it can stretch down as small as it needs and then go up to 500 pixels. And then we can set a medium breakpoint. And for that, we want to repeat 2 columns, and we'll do min max 0 and let it fill as much space as fits. And then similar for like the large size, we'll do large, repeat 3 columns, and then the same thing here. Back here, make sure that everything's working. So we're missing something.
I think it did your 2 and then 3 if you go a little slower. It
Yeah, it
jumps
looks
down
like it's doing
right
okay.
there. Yeah.
Looks like we don't. Oh, I know what I missed. So let's go back to property card. I want to actually wrap these in a card element. That will give us some of that like padding around them.
Yeah.
Let's see, link card. Cool, that's better. And then one more small thing is we wanted a border radius on our image. Add that back in. And we'll do medium. There we go. Cool.
Awesome.
So now we have our layout rules, and feel free to interrupt me if there's any other questions. Otherwise, we'll keep trucking through this. Let's see. I want to like limit the width also. So right now it's stretching as much as it can. So we'll add a max width. We'll do 1100 pixels, and we'll do margin inline equals auto, so it centers it. That way we can restrict that a little bit. Nice. A couple more things that we'll just clean up. So we had our header, which kind of looks pretty plain. It's just a normal link right now. So we're gonna wrap this in a view. And then I'll use a card again just to give a little bit of spacing around it. And we'll just change these to our Amplify components. And I'm going to make this a small variation. Oh, and then we can use some more layout rules. So I use the flex component quite a bit. It's really handy for anything layout wise. We want to align these vertically. And then again, we'll do margin inline start equals auto. So then our button will be all the way to the right. And then there were some other component styles I'm going to grab. So right now our button's still styled like the default Amplify UI colors. So I'm just going to grab the rest of these that I had. So there's some styles in here for text inputs, and we'll just briefly look at those. And then some styles for some of the other components that we're going to use too. So I'm going to take these, and then I'm just going to pop these into my theme. Rating. There we go.
I think I might have already forgotten. Are you wrapping the whole thing in a theme provider as well? Okay.
Right. So in the base of our app, because we want our entire app to pick up our new theme. So we'll wrap the app at like the root level in the theme provider, and then that passes it down, like all the context for it down to the rest of our components.
Cool.
And like another thing, if once you add the theme provider, you can kind of see like how it adds the custom properties. So it provides this new div with a data attribute matching our theme. And then that's actually how it picks up the new CSS custom properties that we're building with all of our new theme overrides. Let's see, we had couple more things. So we'll go back to header. We want our cabin logo. So again, we could use icon component for that. And I'm going to load in my Billy braces, my custom icon. And this is just an SVG that I have exported as a React component. And we'll use that as our logo. And I want this Amplify Cabins text to still be available for screen readers. So I'm going to wrap this in a visually hidden component. So this will still be in the DOM, still be available to assistive technologies, but it won't be visually shown in the UI. Let's see. And then the last part I think we're going to show is just setting up some of the like scrolling functionality. So in my mockup, I kind of have like a header, and then we want this properties part to be scrollable. So we can just do that using CSS grid and a little bit of CSS overrides. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to change this to our grid element. I'm going to set the height to 100%. And we want to use template rows. And let's see, we want the header to take up as much space as it needs. So we'll do auto. And then we want the rest of the child or children components to fill the rest of the space. So we'll do 1FR. And we have a scroll view component where if the content inside of it is longer than its available space, it will let it overflow scroll. So we'll put everything inside that. And here's where I'll show where we can add some little bit of extra utility CSS. So we don't often apply any CSS rules to the like body or root elements. So I just have some extra height 100% and overflow hidden. And if we go here now, we can see that just our properties area is scrollable.
Nice.
Cool. So I think that takes care of most everything. Let's see, we had a sign-in route, and right now that's blank because Eric's going to show us about the Authenticator. And then we also had a admin UI page, kind of just with some text inputs. And you saw where I added some of those other theme overrides. So we have some for buttons, for the field controls, which affects our text inputs. So those are reflected in all of these components that we added here.
That's cool.
Yeah, I think that's all I had for my demo. If there's no questions, I can hand it over to Eric now.
So I think we're probably gonna talk about this during Eric's, but I kind of want to throw this out there, and you don't have to answer it right away. But why would someone like start to use the Amplify UI components versus like a material UI or something else? Is it further integrated? I know like there's a slogan out there that says ready to connect to the cloud, and it's like, oh, how's that magic happen? Is that kind of the Authenticator part and other additionals that are coming out?
Yeah, for me, I think it'd be if you want to use some things like the Authenticator and some of the other cloud connected components that we have, because then you have kind of a design system to back up some of this other like more complicated functionality. For me, also, I like the fact that I do have more flexibility for overriding the styling of components. So if I do want to use something like the Authenticator, I have an easy way to make my components match my branding or color scheme, or to build up my own components myself. So for me personally, like we were using a lot of style props for our like custom components that we made here, but I'd probably go through and let's see, where's our property card? You could even like take these out and refactor these into like your own class names to build up your own more complex, I guess, primitive components. So like our card component itself right now, it's pretty basic, but then you could use this to build up your own. So it's a little more tailored to your own needs and solutions.
So you could make like an Alex card that would have all the styles that you just added to.
Yeah.
Cool. Oh, it totally makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add to that too, like the connected components. And theming the connected components is definitely a huge part of that. Like Heather's saying, where you style the authenticator, now you can also style the rest of your app in the same way and have all of the styling in one place. But then there's that Figma integration that I was talking about earlier as well, where if there's like data connected components that you want to connect to data, and then you want the rest of your app to have the same components and use the same theme, that Figma integration is using that same theme object. So you can actually, in Figma, change all your color schemes, all your spacing, and set all of those things in Figma. So you can work with your designer on like what the styling is at that layer. And then when you import that into your app, now the rest of your components now have that branded look and feel.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's really cool. Awesome. Eric, do you want to finish up the authenticator side?
Sure. Sure. We good on time?
Yeah, we're great. We have another 30 minutes, so take your time.
All right. Well, thanks. So yeah, I'm going to show today how we can take Heather's design here, her app, and add authentication into it. So we left off with the sign in button here. It's just authenticator goes here. There's nothing there. And so we want to add in a way for someone to log in and maybe have like some, we'll have some routes that are protected that can only be accessed by users that are authorized. So before we start, if you're following along at home, you can add in the authenticator in our documents here. If you go to Connected Components Authenticator, it shows you a quick start guide. But if essentially you have to, you can install Amplify CLI, and then you run this Amplify init command and Amplify add auth. And this assumes you have an AWS account already. If you don't, they have a generous free plan that you can check out, and you can get into the AWS ecosystem. But you can do this on the command line. Scott and Heather already mentioned Studio, which is a product that has more of a what you see, what you get interface. You can just click on things and generate your backend really easily, including adding authentication through our Cognito service. You can do it that way. And we even mentioned there's other ways of generating your backend. And when you do this, it creates the CloudFormation scripts that generate your backend. Then you would install this AWS Amplify UI React and AWS Amplify through npm install or yarn, and then you'd be all set. So for the sake of time, I already did that here in this app here. And if we go and look at the side, you see there's an AWS exports file. So that has all the information we need for our application. It has where to connect to for our user pool that's used with our Cognito service for authentication. You would typically also see an Amplify folder here, but since this is just a quick demo, I don't have it. That would be also generated, and inside that folder would have all your CloudFormation scripts and everything you need in that place to redeploy your backend and things like that. So let's just jump into the code here and see if we can get an authenticator working on this sign-in page. So first, we need to do a little housekeeping. We have this Amplify here. We need to import in that AWS exports file. So we can put it in from AWS exports. And then we need to do an amplify.configure, which will then pass in the exports file. And then finally, because we're dealing with routes, there is a headless option. So we want to really make the authenticator. We made the authenticator when we did this last year. We made it very flexible, and we made it to the point where you can really customize it. And so we had this headless usage option, which allows us to get into the internals. We use something called XState to do our state management. So you can get into kind of the internals and get what route things are on, and you can use it to really customize the experience when you're logging in. So we're going to do that, you have to add this authenticator provider, and you have to surround your whole app by it. So we'll go ahead and do that. Provider. And then we'll just put this in here. Now the whole app is surrounded by authenticated provider. So now one last step. This was already added in here, but I added in this AWS Amplify UI React styles. So this is going to add the styles for our Authenticator, some default styles. Otherwise, it won't be completely unstyled, but we want to make sure that's in there too. Okay, so let's go into the login. And once again, we go back to our app here. It says Authenticator goes here. So that's not too helpful. So let's add in the Authenticator. So if we save it, so this is interesting. Nothing's showing up here, and I think I know why. It's because I need to clear my cache because I'm already logged in. Let's see here. Let's go to the application. Yeah, so I was doing a demo earlier and I was logged in. So we'll just clear that. There we go. Okay, so here it is. And that's just because I was already logged in. The browser thought I was logged in. And I didn't have anything. Well, I'll show you guys here in a second what I mean. So here is the app. You can also notice that this looks a little different than the default app. If we go to the Authenticator here, like this kind of has this light blue, greenish colors. And this has like a darker green. That's because the styles that Heather already created are already being applied to the Authenticator. And that's one of the reasons you may want to use our theme system and our components, because as you use our Authenticator and our other connected components, it's all ties into the same ecosystem. So it just kind of all fits together really nicely. And you can see here, these are the colors already put in. You can even go even further. I added this in before the call, or Heather added this in and added in like some border width for the router. So you can use the theme object, which I won't get into further, to even more customize this. You can even get rid of these tabs and make it so only someone can log in and not log out. Or they can sign in, but they can't create an account, that is. You can't always log out. And what I want to do here is, when you log in or sign in, anything between the opening and closing brackets of the Authenticator will be displayed. So sometimes you'll see in simpler apps, you'll surround your whole application with the Authenticator. So if you're creating like a dashboard and you only want authenticated or authorized people to be in there, then you would surround your whole app by the Authenticator. But since we have multiple routes here, we can just want to show it on this one login page. Now, once you log in, I want to show a sign out button. So we'll do sign out here. And I'll go ahead and use, since we do have one, we'll use a button, which is from the our UI React library. And then we also want it to sign out. So we'll just do sign out. And then we'll do an on click. And we'll pass sign out there. Cool. So now we have this sign out button that will only show after you log in. So let's create an account. And let me give you a quick tour. Scott mentioned a few of these things, but we can see it in action here. So by the way, when you use that Amplify CLI and you generate your authenticated backend, it's going to ask you some questions if you want to use sign in by email or username or by phone. And I just chose the defaults, which was username, but you can certainly customize that if you want to use email, which is pretty common. So if you create a new account here, you can go, I can put some information. I'm going to use an old email address I have here and put some test. And you can also notice as I was typing, it gives you a little bit of information, like if you're doing it wrong, because there is a certain restrictions on how you can put passwords in, which is configurable in Cognito. And then here I'll put the email address in now. And it's an old email I have, and then I'll just put this in here. It's the username. So I'll click create account here, and now it's emailing me, which I'll grab this code from another tab you can't see right now because I'm logging into my email, and I'll put it in here. And also, if you forgot your password, you can click resend code. I'll click confirm, so it'll go ahead and log in, and now I just see a sign out button. But if you look underneath the covers and you go into your application tab, you can see that there is all these keys in here. So essentially now you're completely logged in. You can use our JavaScript library to get your JSON web tokens, which are kind of ways to talk to our backend services. Now you're kind of in the AWS ecosystem, so you can use this with the API gateway and restrict access to certain routes or to certain lambdas or your EC2 instances. So you're kind of in the ecosystem, you're authenticated and logged in at this point. And if we click log out, we're signed out. And then you can always forget your password. If you forget your password, you can click here. This is all built in. And as we mentioned before, you can do federated sign-in. Someone asked me the other day, could I hook my existing Microsoft SAML-based login system into Cognito? And it's like, yes, you can do federated logins. You can set up your existing authorization systems with Cognito, and it works with the Authenticator here, or our JavaScript library. So now we kind of have a good idea of how this works. And of course, you can do multi-factor authentication. I've seen companies too where they don't let users sign up. So they create the accounts, and the first time they log in, it asks for their new password. We can do that. We can even set it up if you wanted to skip verification. You didn't want someone to enter a code in when they sign up. You can do that too. Let's take a look at this. So we have this sign-in page, but you notice it didn't really do too much. It just kind of went to and showed that sign out button. But I wanted to go to a protected page. So first, I just want to see if I can get it to go to that admin page. Does that, Alex, does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great. One thing that people, I think that watch the show are used to doing like Firebase and things like that. Would you mind jumping back into that config and just showing like the actual API key and like how that configuration is happening?
Sure. So in the what's it? Index TSX file right here, you essentially, once you configure through the Amplify init command, you install the CLI, or you could do it through Studio, and then you run amplify add auth. It generates this AWS exports file here.
So just for folks listening, what that actually is doing, like in AWS at that point, it's setting up that whole Cognito part. And then this AWS exports piece, it's just a definition of those API keys coming back.
Exactly. Yep. That's a definition of where all those keys are. And it creates the CloudFormation scripts, which are, infrastructure as code. So it knows how to generate the backend. You can easily delete the backend just from the command line. So it kind of does all that for you, which is great for front-end developers, or you're just trying to create a project and you don't want to have to write complicated CloudFormation, Terraform, CDK scripts yourself. You can use tools like this that just auto-generate it all.
And the really cool part too is that all three of you can be in this same project, and you can pull down what's already up there in the Amplify side of things to your local and run it as well. Excuse me.
Yes. Yeah,
cool.
You can use multiple environments. Yep.
Yeah, totally. Let's check out one of those protected routes that you're going to show.
Okay, cool. All right, let's jump back into the login. All right, so in this login route, we're going to use this use authenticator, which gives us availability, some hooks that we can use to kind of dig into the internals of our app. So let's do that. I'm going to grab this route, and I'll make this a little bigger. I think that'll be easier to see. And this route will equal use authenticator, and then we have, it's a little bit different syntax, but this is all inside the documentation. We have this context, and we'll do this context.route. And this just says we're going to use this route object, which changes when someone is authenticated or they're signed out or in their sign up or sign in pages or wherever they're at. And then we're going to use this navigate, which is through the React router. And this is, by the way, this use authenticator was just imported in from UI React. So now we can do this use effect. And we'll just do it, just the easy if statement. If route equals authenticated, then we're going to navigate to the admin and replace true. So what this should do is once someone gets authenticated, it should go to the admin route. So let's see if that worked. And we'll come back here. Ehand chat 4. Logging in. And it just takes a second. More than a second. There we go. So we're logged in. And now I went to the admin route. You can see the admin changed to here, and we have information here. So cool, but you notice right away, like it still says sign in here. That's kind of weird. Maybe we should fix that to say sign out. So let's do that in our header file. So someone could, sign out after they do this. So we're going to add in right here. And I already did, this is a lot of stuff that Heather already did. This is just a header at the top. So I'm going to once again grab some stuff out. We're going to add that route and sign out. Use Authenticator again, which I already have imported in. And then we'll have this context object, which will return a context.route and a context.signout. And that's just kind of the syntax we use for these kind of headless hooks that we're going to use. And then we'll add right here a sign out. And right now, all we have is this view here with this button that says sign in. So right under here, I'm going to add in a route equals authenticated. Then we want to do something. Else, we want to do something else. So if they're authenticated, we want to show a button that says sign out. So we're going to call this sign out, but we want to come in here, add it on a click handler or log out, that function we created. And then for here, and it's giving me an error because I need to move this up. And I'll move this in here. Okay. All right. So you see it's changed to sign out now. So I think it's already working. So notice I'm authenticated and now it's letting me fix it. So if I click sign out, it's sign out. And you can see here, I need to do one other thing. Go back to the login. And we don't need this any longer because we're doing the routes a different way. So let's try it again. That login we just created. And signing in is just taking an unusually long time. Maybe my system's a little slow today. Okay, cool. We see the sign out here at the top and we can click sign out. So what we did here is we're redirecting to this route, but you can notice if I just type in admin here, we have now secretly gotten to the admin route, even though we're not logged in, which is not what we want to do. So let's see real quick how we can create like a protected route. And just to be clear, this is just protecting it on the client side. If you were doing this in production, you really need to protect it on the server side. So any kind of backend endpoints you need to probably put behind like an API gateway or have some authorization rules in place. Otherwise, people could just probably get into it because you never trust the client.
It's a great reminder. People forget that all the time.
Yeah. All right. So to protect this route, I'm going to go to our app TSX file. And right here, this is the admin route. You can see there's nothing really special here. So I'm kind of adding like a route card, but this is really, I'm using I already did this beforehand just to save time. This is really looking at our use authenticator, using that route, and then navigating to this. So this is just a real simple way to change the navigation depending on if user is authenticated or not. And so I wrote this earlier. And so that should be, we can just use this require auth component and surround it. And this is also very similar if you look at the React router documentation on how to create protected routes. So I stole some inspiration from there. So we just do require auth here. We'll put the edit property in the middle. And that should be it. So let's see if it works. So if we go up here and we do admin, so it redirected to login. So it didn't show the route as which is the right thing it should do. So it just redirects to login. Now, if we log in, we just make sure this didn't break and that you can get to the admin route. And is it thinking as it signs in? Cool. So it's still logging into the admin route. And then at this point, we could fill out all this information. We click save property, hit our external endpoints in our AWS ecosystem, and be protected, and we would be all set from there. So that's all I have to show on this.
Nice.
Any questions?
Oh, it was a really good overview. I love how the UI components are all tied in. Just as far as like if no one's done AWS Amplify before, can you talk a little bit about like the features that are there for like real time and things like that? Would you mind?
You want to talk about that, Eric, or I could?
Yeah. So the question is, what sort of real-time features we have?
Just in general, like what people use AWS Amplify for.
Yeah, I mean, they use it for all sorts of things. Like a lot of the use case I just showed for the Authenticator is pretty common. A lot of people use this Authenticator, and it's for, to remind everyone again, it's for not just React, but for Vue and Angular, and we have Flutter, and we're supporting more and more of these frameworks and libraries all the time. But it's also really used a lot with our AWS JavaScript Amplify library. And that library allows you to connect to data store. AppSync is really important. So it's almost like our managed GraphQL interface. And we have tools like Data Store that are similar to like Firestore, where you can quickly like update data in real time. There's subscriptions that you can do with our AppSync service. So you don't have to set up WebSockets or anything. Data will just automatically get updated all the time. We have S3 tools that connect to our, not really real time, but you can connect to S3 buckets. So yeah, there's quite a few things people use it, from small startups who just need to get up and running really quickly with AWS ecosystem to even larger companies. And then we give hooks and ways in the background where you can, would you say, Scott, eject from our Amplify ecosystem at some point if you need to, and kind of keep going with what you want?
Yeah, I mean, we have like capabilities where you can add CDK. So if there's like something that's not available in Amplify, then you can add a CDK. You can use CDK to kind of attach that when you deploy, and then it'll deploy those resources as well. So there's a lot of flexibility there.
And it kind of extends out all the way through the AWS like ecosystem after that, right? Like you can write your own Lambdas and kind of put those through all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just connected right in.
Nice. We may have lost Scott. I don't know. Or not Scott, sorry, Eric.
Yeah, what happened there? So I would also just say, like, we're an open source library and we treat feature requests really seriously. So I'd encourage everyone to just check it out, play around with it, play with the Authenticator, the UI components, some of the other Amplify features, and just let us know, if there's a component that we're missing that you're really interested in, tell us that, because we're currently working on more connected components, and we just want to make this just make it easier for developers to build UIs that connect to the cloud. So
Here's my pipe dream component. I want to be able to create like my Dynamo setup, my CloudFormation does all of its bit, and then I get a table that's editable right out of the box, like that has all the columns, and I can update data in my app. What do you think?
absolutely, let's start on it tomorrow.
I'm sure it'll be a piece of cake. No problem.
Yeah. Oh, yes. That doesn't sound complicated. If it's your dream component, then it's definitely going to be complicated.
Yeah, we really love complex tables. That's my
Yeah.
favorite component to design.
I think you guys should like get with the Kendo UI folks and just like talk about table design and like go to town on it. It would be great.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for like giving me a full tour of all the new AWS Amplify UI components. It sounds like even though like you're far along, there's probably a lot more that's going to continue since you have this base now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have a lot of plans, especially with the primitives. We want to go across multi-platform and multi-frameworks. So we want to add more frameworks there for people using Vue and Angular, and then with components, like your idea is a great one. We want to add more components that just make things easier for developers, and take away some of those really complex workflows, but then also try to make them as flexible and customizable and themeable as possible. That's kind of our goal.
Sweet.
And also just make things smaller, faster, better. I think that's just taking what we have already and just making it that much easier for developers to use. And
yep,
that's exactly, we've been looking at that as well.
You had mentioned before you used to use Stencil to kind of create the different frameworks or use it in the different frameworks. Is there something you use today to be able to create those across like Angular, React, Flutter?
So we ran into a lot of problems with Stencil, in particular around customization, where like, for example, the Authenticator, you actually couldn't, when it was in Stencil, you couldn't access it via password managers. So password managers couldn't see the fields because they were in the shadow DOM. So there's a lot of limitations, I think, with web components in that regard. In terms of like tooling to generate components, the philosophy that we took there is we really want to respect each framework for what it does and what it does well. So rather than auto-generating components and maybe ending up with APIs that don't make quite as much sense, the approach that we want to take is to build a React component that feels like a React component, to build, a Vue component that feels like a Vue component. And so as much as possible, we want to make APIs consistent across frameworks. But at the same time, we don't want to do things that are like unnatural for that particular framework. So, and for that reason, we really feel like it makes more sense for our goals with the UI framework to write them as that in that framework, using kind of the paradigms and naming standards and all of that.
Gotcha. Very cool. Probably my last question for you all. Is this open source, and how can people get involved to help?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's an open source. I believe it's Apache 2 licensed. We have a GitHub. If you just search for Amplify UI, I think it's like the second result. And we'd love to hear, feedback, feature requests, bugs, contributions. There's a lot of contributors that help us, especially around docs issues, but we're also working with a few contributors on some other features as well, like on our map component.
Sweet. That sounds awesome. Well, again, thank you all so much for joining me on this awesome Friday and kind of walk through some code. I really appreciate it, and maybe we can have you on once you get some more components going.
Thank you. Yeah, it was great to be here. Thanks so much.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah, thanks everyone.